Now we're going to work problem 6.31 on page 304. We're doing a cost assignment using activity-based costing and weighted average method for a process. So this is process costing, meaning we're making a bunch of things that are very similar, and it's just sort of like an assembly line, right? So it's easy to imagine that we have this working process is basically batches of stuff moving from department to department. In this case, we have bicycles, and the department we're looking at is the cutting part. And so you can imagine there's a factory where they cut the metal that goes to make a bicycle. Then that metal leaves the cutting area and goes to the welding area where they weld together the parts of the bicycle, and then finally they paint it, probably just the frame, I would guess. So cutting, welding, and painting, and we're doing the department. And so we're going to look at how the bicycle materials move through the cutting department. And I think it's easy if you think of working processes, basically that factory floor where we're doing this. So it's easy to imagine you've got some metal, and as you look around at the beginning, you've got metal that nothing has been done with, some sheets of metal. Then as you go further along the factory work line, maybe, you'll see some metal that has been cut out, and maybe you get to the end and that metal is being arranged to be transported out to the welding part of the factory. So the working process is what we really try to keep up with, because it's easy to count how many things come out, right? It's easy to count how many sheets of metal we put in. It's like, well, where are we at work in process? So that's what process costing is really about, keeping up with the work in process inventory. So the first thing you do on this is we're going to do the physical flow schedule. So that's what we're going to do. So physical flow schedule, basically you take what's easy to understand, which is how many units went out, right? How much stuff came in, and what our current working process is, so that way we can figure out how did stuff flow through. It's basically we just plug the numbers in based on the numbers we know. All right, so I'm going to move the book out of the way, and we're going to work this. As you can see, I have kind of already set up my physical flow schedule, which if you, earlier in the chapter, you've seen a few of these. So you have units to account for, is what we're figuring the first part, and units accounted for in the second part. So you have to know your units beginning work in process, your units you started, those are things that were transferred in, and your total to account for, and then your units completed and transferred out, ending work in process inventory, total units accounted for. So this number and this number should match, total to account for and total accounted for, so that way you know you've taken care of what you're supposed to. You can assign your correct work in process inventories for beginning and end, and therefore you can figure out your costs and assign them. So let's look at what we know about our physical flow. All right, so in the book it tells us our beginning work in process is $40,500. So we can put that down, right? I'm sorry, it's not dollars, it's units. We're doing units of bicycle. So 40,500 units. All right, so that's what we start out with in work in process. So you can imagine on the first day of the month you were to look at the factory floor, there would be pieces of metal that are equivalent to 40,500 units being worked on. All right, so units started and transferred in, well, we don't really know that. So we don't know how many units that we were supposed to count for yet. But we do know how many were completed and transferred out. They tell us that, 121.5. So we can do this. We know that over the whole month, they did, in the month of September, they did 120. So if you were to go look at finished goods inventory, or if you tracked what came into finished goods inventory, presumably they sold some too, but what went into finished goods inventory was 121.5, which some of them were this, and some of them were whatever got transferred in. And of course there is some ending work in process inventory, which we know that, right? we know that at the end of September, when they're doing this, we know there's 13,500 units being worked on. So our ending work in process is that. All right, so I can figure out how many units I need to account for, because I can take my 121.5 and my 13.5, right? My units transferred out, and my work in process at the end of the month, and I can say, okay, over the whole month we had to deal with 135,000 units. All right, they either came out and went on to, I guess they go on to welding, not finished goods. They come out and go on to finished goods, or they're still sitting on the cutting floor somewhere in that factory. 135 units worth. All right, so that's how many I've accounted for. That's how many I need to account for. So 135,000 goes right there. All right, so now I can just plug this number, right? So I can take, let's do it down here, 135,000 minus 40,500 means 94.5. All right, so 94,500 units got started. So during September, if you went down to the factory floor on September 1st, you would see, oh, there's 40,500 units hanging out on the factory floor at some various stage of work. Some just beginning, some almost done, but 40,500. During the course of September, 94,500 came in. And some of this got finished and sent out. In fact, 121.5 got finished and sent out, which left 13,500 on the factory floor still being worked for. So that's the physical flow of units during the month. So now we have to use these concepts from physical flow and what's left in work in process and the percentage completed to go on and figure out our next step, part 2. I'll meet you at the next video.